The New York Islanders had a surprise scratch, a surprise starter in goal, and we had our first look at Maxim Tsyplakov on the second line. We're going to break all of that down and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. We have got a lot to get to on today's show. But first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, just send us an email. LockedOnIslanders@gmail.com is the address. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long, and I am live tweeting during nearly every Islanders home and road game. So make sure you join me for some instant insight and analysis. And it's great to talk a little Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. Lots to discuss on today's show after the Islanders 4-3 win over the Philadelphia Flyers at UBS Arena. Again, I don't put too much stock in preseason wins and losses. And even though the lineup is getting more and more like what we're likely to see come opening night, we're still not there. There's still some unsettled business to take care of. And obviously, we'll talk about all of these things on today's show. But the big thing that we were all looking forward to was seeing Maxim Tsyplakov play on the second line. And I think the fact that he has had such a good performance in the preseason games he was in up until last night, the fact that he scored 31 goals in the KHL last year. That was fourth in the league. You win the battle between allegedly 11, 12 other teams who were also trying to bid on his services as a free agent coming over from the KHL. All of these things you anticipate a lot about, what are you going to see? And Tsyplakov started in the bottom six in training camp, playing on the third line most of the time, fourth line occasionally. But in the first two preseason games he was in, he looked good. And, he got some power play time. He got a little penalty kill time, which he did do, by the way, in the KHL. And basically, with his strong play in camp and in preseason, he earned a look from Patrick Roy on the second line. So what do we end up seeing in this game from Maxim Tsyplakov? Well, here's how it goes. He ends up playing a little more than 16 minutes. He was on the power play extensively, 4 minutes of power play ice time. Only finished with one shot on goal. And again, not the end-all and be-all to me. Did not figure in the scoring, but was a +1. To me, the most interesting aspect of his game or the moment, I think, that stood out most is when he got in front of the Philadelphia goal and tried to screen the goalie. And, I saw some people on social media saying, oh, yeah, that's kind of like, what we've seen before. Years ago from Sean Avery of the Rangers against the Devils, and okay, wasn't quite that, because that was a little more out of the ordinary, but I liked the idea. And the thing I like most about it is this. Tsyplakov in the KHL, he was a Cy Young kind of guy. 31 goals, what was it, 16 assists? Much more of a shooter than a playmaker. And Lord knows the New York Islanders need guys who are shoot-first guys in this lineup. Okay? But the fact is, you read the scouting report on Tsyplakov, and the one thing that stands out is he is not a great skater. And when I say a great skater, I'm talking about speed. I'm not saying he has a bad stride or isn't strong on his skates. I'm talking about speed. So when you don't have speed, you have to do other things on the ice to be effective, whether it's go to the dirty areas, whether it's the idea of screening the goalie, whether it's digging in the corners, whether it's being so positionally sound or having such a high hockey IQ that you can handle, you get with the high hockey IQ, you anticipate where the play is going to be, where you need to go, and bingo, you're in the right position at the right time, even though you may not be as fast as some of your teammates or the opposition. You are in the right place at the right time as a result. So I like the idea that Tsyplakov went to the dirty area. I like the idea that he was thinking a little bit outside the box as far as the screen was concerned. I look at this situation right now from an Islanders coaching staff and management perspective. Who's going to be on that second line with Brock Nelson and with Kyle Palmieri? That's like still one of those unresolved questions. We know the first line is set. That's Bo, Barzy, and Duclair. But the second line, we know 2/3 of it. Brock Nelson, Kyle Palmieri. We don't know the third candidate. And by the way, if you go to our YouTube page, we have a poll up. Who would you like to see on the second line with Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri? You can vote there, and we'd certainly love to hear your thoughts and comments about that. But again, whether it's a former first-round pick in Simon Holmstrom, or whether it's your big KHL open market free agent signing in Maxim Tsyplakov, it's a win-win, I think, overall for the Islanders organization if one of those guys steps up and takes the reins of taking control of that role, fits into the top six. Every day, as you know, we've talked on this show far too often about how the Islanders only had 4 top 6 forwards last year. And no offense to any of the guys, but, putting Casey Cizikas or putting Hudson Fasching, who's still out with an injury and did not play in this game, or putting Pierre Engvall, or, some of these other guys who skated on that second line, they just didn't belong there. You can go back to Uncle Leo being on the top line years ago. The Islanders have been filling in bottom 6 guys in the top 6 for far too long. So one of these 2 guys, or maybe Anders Lee, or maybe, Pierre Engvall, or maybe someone else, has got to step up and be that guy who is a legitimate second line guy who's going to get you 20 goals, give or take, and fit in and maximize what you have with Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri. And I am not sure. Brock Nelson, can pass very well, but Nelson and Palmieri are both kind of scorer types. And I don't know if Tsyplakov is the best fit there, although I think ideally he might make your line the most dangerous. And, if he is the kind of guy that Anders Lee was years ago, where he would go in front of the net and screen the goalie and get into the dirty areas and win some battles along the boards, and I think Tsyplakov has a better, harder shot than Anders Lee did and does. But, maybe he adds the most offensive juice, whereas you kind of look at Holmstrom, he adds more speed. He's maybe a little bit more responsible defensively. There are different, but he doesn't have the physicality. There are different skills that each one of them can bring to the game that I think, could be beneficial. To me, it's less important that one particular guy steps up. The important thing, which guy it is, the important thing is that somebody does it, that somebody comes out, and it doesn't have to be on October 10th when the season starts. But let's say by November 1st or November 15th, somebody steps up and says, you know what? I am that guy. I'm that second line guy. I'm going to fit in on that line and be what this Islander team needs to have a really productive top six. Again, get your votes in on our YouTube page, but I'm interested in seeing it. I think Tsyplakov looked fine. I'm not saying he was outstanding, but I think he definitely has the potential to fit in. And it may take him some time to adjust, but I think he has the ability before this season is over to be a legitimate second line winger if they coach him right, if he works hard, and if all the pieces fall into place. All right, we have got more to get to on today's show. We're going to talk about the scratch that we mentioned and how that fits into the big picture. Plus, we'll talk a little bit about the game and the what the Islanders did well, what they didn't. We've got that. Plus, oh yes, for our Islanders' birthday of the day, a bottom six forward, more of a checking forward, who was with the team in the early to mid 2000 teens. Let's see if you can guess who this former Providence College alum is. We've got all that still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you could check out the latest stats, view live, play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet, and there is so much to bet on. This is October, folks. The busiest and most exciting time in the sports calendar. Mets and Yankees both in the postseason. You've got college and pro football in full swing. Hockey is about a week away for the Islanders, less than 10 days now. All of this going on at the same time. Check out the latest odds at FanDuel. So again, get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So there was a surprise scratch in this game, and maybe it shouldn't have been that big of a surprise because every day, as you know, we mentioned yesterday on the show that this player was skating with the extras, but Pierre Engvall sitting out this game as a healthy scratch. And again, it's preseason, and you don't want to read too much into the preseason. A guy sits, a guy plays. It's not the end all and be all. But what we do see right now is that Liam Foudy has certainly had a really, really solid preseason and training camp. Julien Gauthier has looked really solid at times in preseason and training camp. Pierre Engvall, not as much. And Engvall right now, in preseason games, -5. And again, plus minus, not a stat that is always, connected directly to what an individual player does. And it's also very much a team stat. If you're on a terrible team, you could be the best plus minus on your team and be a -12 for a season or worse. But at the same time, I don't think Engvall has taken that next step. And I don't know if he's ever going to. We have to see. I certainly hope he does. Patrick Roy, less than enthused in his defense of Engvall at the morning skate on Monday. Here's what he said to the media Monday about Pierre Engvall. I think he had an okay camp. Obviously, he's -5. So I'm not saying he's playing bad or what. I think he's been trying to do the things we're asking for, but I have nothing negative to say about his play. Yeah, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement. It's not, you know what it is? If you cut through it, this is essentially a wake-up call for Pierre Engvall. It's basically saying we've got lots of guys fighting for roster spots, and your roster spot is not necessarily as secure as you think it is. And the question is, does Pierre Engvall get the message? And, Engvall is always highly criticized by a lot of the fan base, and I get it. He's not physical at all. He has good speed. He has a long reach because of his size, but he's not going to win a lot of battles in the corners. He's knocked off the puck easily. He's not a great finisher, and he's not elite defensively, although he's not terrible defensively. But you want more from a guy who the team signed to a 7-year contract, even if, Pierre Engvall is not a guy who's kind of breaking the bank with a $3 million a year cap hit. So I get it. But honestly, at the end of the day, Engvall has to step up. And if he doesn't step up, then, he may very well be either the 13th forward or the 14th forward, or I don't think they'll waive him and see if anybody picks him up. I don't think that's going to necessarily happen. But, again, continuing, you asked me if I was satisfied with him. The answer is there's things that he could have done a little bit better, but nothing major to me. And, Engvall is kind of taking it in stride. He said, obviously, it doesn't feel good when you're a minus. I think after 2 games, it's hard to tell. You got to play a lot of games. And I think in the end, that's where you can tell where your plus minus is. And if you look at my seasons, I've always been on the plus side. And then, he said, of course, you want to play all the games. I know I'm not playing today, but I got a good skate in and a good workout, so I'm ready for the next one. So, Engvall seems to be taking it in stride. I think Roy is sending a message to Pierre Engvall. We need more from you. And nobody is going to expect Pierre Engvall to turn into a 30-goal scorer. Heck, I take 20. Nobody is expecting him to be the next Cal Clutterbuck when it comes to physicality. But you need more consistency. You need him to use his size and speed more. And you need him to play more responsible defense and be smarter with the puck. You need what I think the Islanders need from Pierre Engvall is you need to know more consistently that Pierre Engvall was in the game. There have been times where late in the second period or early in the third period, all of a sudden you'll hear the announcer mention Pierre Engvall's name for some reason, and you're like, oh wow, yeah, he's in. Engvall's playing tonight. You got to get more from this guy. And while I'm not concerned about the $3 million cap hit, committing a 7-year deal this year will be the second of that 7-year deal to a third line guy who last year gave you 10 goals and 28 points in 74 games while playing on the power play, on the second power play unit, because 7 of those 28 points came with the man advantage. You're not getting value. He is not, in my mind, fit for the top 6. He doesn't finish well enough. He's not physical enough for a checking line. I'm not sure exactly where Pierre Engvall best fits in to this hockey team. That being said, there are things he does that are important. The long reach is important if utilized correctly. The speed is important if it's integrated into the game plan and you coordinate it with your line mates. It can create time and space for Engvall or for his teammates. He is not a player with no value to speak of, but he's got to be better than what we've seen. He looked great in the playoffs and down the stretch in 2022, 2023. He played pretty well in the playoffs. That line was probably the best line on the Islanders in the playoffs, albeit 5 games, of which you lost 4. But you got to see more from Pierre Engvall. And while he may not be the most popular player among Islander fans right now, we all should be rooting for him to take that next step forward, because it only benefits the Islanders. And the odds of Lou Lamoriello being able to trade Engvall with 6 years left on his contract, not looking all that promising. All right, we've got more to get to. We'll see if Engvall gets the message. We got more to get to today. We'll talk a little bit more about the win over the Flyers, plus our Islanders' birthday of the day, all that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time now has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite part of the Game Time app remains the view from your seat. You go on the app and you can get a panoramic view from your seat before you purchase the tickets, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. Now for your second listen, go find Locked On NHL, where the local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So the Islanders earn a win. Nice way to continue the preseason, a 4-3 win over the Flyers. And, obviously, the game-winning goal by Kyle Palmieri in the final minute. Palmieri with a goal and an assist. Mike Riley with a pair of helpers. The Islanders end up with the W, and that is encouraging. Gotta say, I liked the play of Palmieri. Anders Lee with a goal. That was solid. Mike Riley and Scott Mayfield, both a +2. Mayfield with 1 assist. There were things to like, and I was surprised, I have to say, that Jakub Skarek not only started, because it was announced before the game that Marcus Hogberg would be confirmed as the starter, and yet Skarek gets the start, plays the whole game, gets the win, giving up 3 goals on just 18 shots. But some big saves in there, especially late in the game. The .833 save percentage doesn't really tell it all. And, when you limit the opposition to just 18 shots, that's really good. The frustrating thing about it is that you shouldn't be giving up that many goals on 18 shots. But the big thing, in my mind, the PK, still an issue. You had 3 power play chances for the Philadelphia Flyers, and twice the puck ends up in the back of the net. Rasmus Ristolainen, his third period goal that tied the game, that was on the power play. Anthony Richard, the first goal by the Flyers in the second period, that was on the power play. The PK has got to be better. And I know that we're looking at a preseason game and still a learning curve. But this lineup, with the exception of Jakub Skarek, who is unlikely to be on the NHL roster, and then you had Julien Gauthier, who's fighting for a roster spot, Grant Hutton. Other than those 3 guys, this was mostly an NHL lineup. This is close to what we're going to see, in once the games start to count. And there's just 1 preseason game left. So I hope that Tommy Albaline and Patrick Waugh spend some time working on the PK before the last preseason game, which is coming up at the end of this week. It is important to get that PK straightened out. To me, that is one of the bigger concerns I have heading in to the upcoming season. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. Monday was the 40th birthday of former Islanders winger Colin McDonald, a 4-year player at Providence College, drafted by the Oilers in the second round back in 2003, made his NHL debut with Edmonton in 2009-2010, briefly played for the Penguins, and then joined the Islanders for 2012-2013, spent 3 years with the Islanders, then was off to Philadelphia for parts of 2 years, and finished his career in the AHL in 2019-2020. 148 career NHL games for Colin McDonald, 20 goals, 46 points, 73 penalty minutes. He played in 11 playoffs games, 8 of them with the Islanders, 2 goals, 1 assist, all of those coming as a member of the Isles. One of Colin McDonald's better games as an Islander, March 28th, 2013, the Islanders visiting the Flyers in Philadelphia. Evgeny Nabokov, the Islanders goalie, Ilya Bryzgalov, the goalie for the Flyers. And the Flyers took a 2-0 lead after 1 period. The Islanders got 1 back in the second. And then in the third, midway through, our Islanders birthday of the day, Colin McDonald scores his 5th of the year. Keith Aucoin and Michael Grabner with the assists. And 5.5 minutes later, Colin McDonald strikes again. His 6th, Matt Martin and Casey Cizikas get the helpers. The Flyers get a power play late in the game when Franz Nielsen takes delay of game and Scott Hartnell ties it. We go to overtime. Then we go to a shootout where Josh Bailey wins it for the Islanders. They beat the Flyers in a shootout 4-3. But for Colin McDonald, our Islanders birthday of the day, 2 goals. He was a +1. He had 5 penalty minutes, 4 shots on goal, and played 15 minutes and 43 seconds of ice time. He dropped the gloves with Scott Hartnell in the first period, so only an assist standing between Colin McDonald and the Gordie Howe hat trick in this game. Colin McDonald is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day, everydayers. We will be back tomorrow. We'll hopefully have the latest news, notes, and happenings as the Islanders are off until October 4th when they close out the preseason against the New York Rangers at UBS Arena. So we are looking very much forward to that. And we'll have any roster news, injury updates, and all that and more. So make sure you join us for that. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.